He's going to torture me, kill me, and chop me up into pieces so nobody can ever find me.
Kidnapped at Knifepoint, punched in the face, and made to fear for her life. Those were the things 21-year-old Alexis Ruhlen had to endure in her toxic relationship.
It's very normalized in our culture to be in a toxic relationship.
She says she and her ex-boyfriend met on an app when she was a senior in high school.
It was very whirlwind. It was very fast moving. We were doing all these activities. It felt very adult to me, and I hadn't had a super adult, serious relationship where I was going on all of these dates and doing all of these things. So it was very different for me. There was no complaints, at least for the first 1 or 2 months, I would say.
The honeymoon period didn't last long.
He was very controlling. He'd say, "Oh, you're wearing that? Like, maybe you should change." Or like, "I don't really want you talking to this person." Or, "Why do you even follow this person anymore? You don't talk to them. Do you talk to them? Why would you talk to them?" It just started very subtly, and then it started to build and build and build. In the beginning, I definitely was like, "Oh, this is really nice. Like, he cares about me. He doesn't want anyone else to have me. I guess this is what older guys are like, you know. I guess this is what an adult relationship is. I'm not a kid anymore. Like, I need to get used to this. I can't have people looking at me." But he was also manipulating me into thinking that. Because when he would say these controlling things and I would say, "Well, why?" He would just say, "Well, why should anyone else look at you? Like, you're mine."
There was a 3-year age gap between Alexis and her ex.
I've always been told my whole life that I'm very mature and, I don't seem my age at all. And anytime he would have a problem with me, it was because I was younger, and it was because I was still in high school, or because I was just a freshman in college. And it was just very, even more so manipulative, because then it was like, well, nobody else is going to want to date me. He puts up with me.
About a year into their relationship, Alexis says the verbal manipulation turned into physical violence.
It did start with a push. It started because I discovered that he was cheating on me, and I didn't tell him that I knew. So he found out that I knew he was cheating. I don't know what went through his head, but once he found out, he shoved me and he wouldn't let me leave for a few hours. He told me that I couldn't go home until this was resolved. But I was scared because that was the first time he or anyone had ever put their hands on me, and I didn't know how to react. I feel like deep down I knew that it was wrong, and I was maybe a little bit embarrassed. I mean, my friends knew, but they were my age. So no one else that could have been like, "Hey, like, I know more than you. This isn't right." Nobody like that knew.
The two had been dating just under 2 years when the kidnapping happened. Alexis was on her college campus, pursuing a degree in nursing.
At this point, he had been physically abusive for over a year, I would say. And I was not able to leave him, which is very important for people to know, that I was not able to leave, because if I tried to leave him, he would break into my house. He would hurt me. He would take my animals out. He would take my cats out of my house and threaten to hurt them if I tried to leave and I wasn't here. So there was really no way for me to leave without feeling like my life or my family's lives were in danger. So at this point of the relationship, I was just super run down. I really didn't want to be around him. So whenever I was around him, I was just sleeping. Like, if we were going somewhere, I was asleep in the car. If I was at his house, we were watching a movie, I was sleeping. Like, I just did my best to avoid him without causing trouble. The morning of October 13th, I was on my way to school because I had a meeting with my advisor to go over the next semester's schedule. And then I also had class. He was always constantly calling me on FaceTime because he wanted to see where I was and make sure that I wasn't lying about it. So he FaceTimes me and tells me that I have to record this meeting with my advisor because my advisor is a guy. This was normal to me. This was something I had to do a lot with people. I had to record conversations and, take pictures to prove that I was with who I said I was with. and where I was. It didn't seem out of the ordinary to me at that moment. I was walking to my class and I looked up to make sure that I wasn't going to run into somebody who was walking in front of me. That's just very involuntary, to just look up to make sure that you're not going to run into somebody. And he immediately, who are you looking at? Who's there? Who are you walking with? And I was like, dude, like, slow your roll. You were just on FaceTime with me for this whole entire walk. You know I wasn't walking with anyone. You're on FaceTime with me. And he's like, no. Show me who it is. Show me who it is. And it was a guy. And I just like turned the camera around and he freaked out. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I have things to do today. And so I just hung up on him and I blocked him from calling me and texting me. Did this seem not normal to me? No. This was something that happened all the time. You know, he'd flip out and I just block him to get a few moments of peace, to do what I needed to do. And then once I was done, I would unblock him and things would be okay. So I didn't really feel like anything was out of the ordinary at that moment.
Alexis contacted him after her meeting, but found he had not calmed down, so she blocked his number again. She resumed her day by going to one of her classes.
I'm absolutely unbothered at this point because, again, this was normal. This was normal. We would argue all the time and he would freak out all the time. But I thought that I was physically safe because I was far away. So I'm really having like a good time in class. Like, I'm learning, I'm really invested. And all of a sudden I see all of these emails coming through. And all of these emails are just gradually getting more intense and more threatening. And, you know, they start with, well, you're not in class. Where are you? Like, you're cheating on me. And so I'm just reading and he's like, you know, if you don't tell me where you are, if you don't leave class to call me, I'm going to have to come to the school and find you. And then it was, all right, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And then it was, I'm 10 minutes away. Why won't you just call me? And then it was, all right, I'm on campus. I parked my car. You know, I'm going to be looking in every single classroom until I find you. If I find you, I'm going to walk into your class and I'm going to kill you. I'm going to gut you like a fish. I'm going to kill everyone in there. I'm going to walk in there crying, like just various things that he was threatening to do. And then it was, I just looked into your classroom, your professor, and then he provided a description of my professor. And you're not there. And I saw this and I was like, well, I'm sitting in class, but how does he know what my professor looks like? Because he doesn't know my professor's name. So is he here? But if he's here and he looked in the classroom, like, why didn't he see me? So now I'm starting to panic a little bit. Because remember, I'm seeing these after the fact. Like, I'm a little bit late. I'm a few minutes late on seeing these. So he's kind of like, okay, like, I'm going back home. I'll be waiting at your house for you when you come back. And we'll deal with this. And if you don't come home, then I'll show up at your job. And so I'm like, okay, like, that's more manageable. Like, I'll talk to him, you know, probably end up being hit by him, but at least there's nothing in danger here. Like, I'm not in danger here. And then the last email that I got from him was a suicide note. And it was a suicide note to everyone in his life, saying that it was my fault, and to his mom, he's so sorry, and to his dad, can he watch the dog for him, and to his friends, he's sorry, but like, he's sorry he didn't tell them what he had been going through. And so now I'm like, okay, well, I don't want him to do that, you know, like, this is still my boyfriend, even though he's acting crazy. This is still my boyfriend. It's still a human. I don't want him to hurt himself.
Once class was over, Alexis talked to a friend on the phone, then received a call from her ex's mother.
She never calls me unless I'm with him and he's just not answering his phone. And I'm mad. So I answer him like, what? Like, what's going on? And she says, well, what happened? So I don't know what happened. Like, I know what's going on for me. I don't know what's happening for you. So I'm just like, you know what? I need to call you back.
Confused and worried, Alexis approached her vehicle.
I open my door and I put my bag down on the passenger seat and I climb in, and I just see him dive from the trunk in between to the front with a knife. So I throw my door open and I dive headfirst out and I'm screaming. And he just pulls me right back in by my hoodie. And he starts screaming at me, telling me, how could I do this when he doesn't have any weed anymore? He's run out of weed for the day. And I know he's in a bad mood. And where was I? I was definitely cheating on him. And now I'm really going to get it. He tells me that he's going to make me drive to Harriman State Park and he's going to torture me, kill me, and chop me up into pieces so nobody can ever find me. And if I alert anybody on the road, if anything happens to us while we're driving, it's going to be worse for me. While we're driving, he's punching me in the face from the back seat. He throws a pumpkin in my head because we had gone pumpkin picking the day before. And he had asked me, why is this pumpkin still in your car? You should have taken it in, which makes no sense. So it just goes to show his mental state at the moment. So he's just punching me, and I'm afraid because if he can punch me so hard that I'm swerving all over the road, he has no care for my life, for his life, for anyone else's life. So I started getting the idea that he was serious and I was really going to die that day. I was begging, I was pleading, and then, I kind of noticed that that would make him more upset. So I just stopped crying and I just stopped responding to him, just let him hit me, just kept driving where he told me to drive. And I was just I was praying. I'm not a religious person, but I was praying and I was apologizing to my parents, and he just kept going. And I remember thinking oh my God, when is this going to end? It's not it keeps going. I feel like I've been driving forever. We get to Harriman State Park and he tells me to turn in. And then when I go to, he grabs the wheel and turns it back straight. So then I start crying again because I'm oh my God, I had already come to terms with this is what was going to happen to me. And now he's telling me, I've thought of something even worse for you. He tells me that I'm going to have to call my best friend on the phone. And if she answers and she knows what's going on, he's going to kill me. And that had nothing to do with me. There was nothing I could do about that. So again, it just goes to show he was just very all over the place, wasn't thinking logically. There was nothing I could say or do to make him stop. He even tells me when we pass a police car that if that police officer pulls me over because I'm not driving properly, that he's going to kill the police officer and I'm going to have to drive away. So at this point, he's really just nothing to lose in his mind. This is also very scary already. He's in the front seat next to me at this point, he's literally sitting like this against the window, just staring at me with the knife in his hand. My face is bruised. There's honey in my hair because I had a stick of honey from pumpkin picking and he had poured it all over me.
Alexis says he made her drive to an outlet mall and said she had to buy him new ski pants.
And I was just kind of well, I can't go in with you. And I don't have that money in my account, they're not going to let you use my card. He's well, you can come in with me. I just said, look at my face. I look like a mess. People are going to be afraid. People are going to say something. And he goes, well, just fix it. And I said, well, fix it how? And he said, with magic. So I was okay, at this point, I think he's just fully lost his mind. And I turn into Woodbury Commons and he tells me that there's one specific parking spot that he's thinking of. And if I don't park there, he's just going to stab me. That's it. He tells me that it's well, you had been wanting to watch that documentary about the serial killer, but, I'm going to make this such a big deal and I'm going to kill you. And both of us are going to have our own Netflix series. And it's just these specific statements that just really stick out in my head, and I'll never forget them. I'll never forget the things that he said to me and the way that he said them that just made me more scared than what was actually going on, almost.
Alexis parked her car on a deserted floor of the mall's parking garage.
He gets out of the car and he takes my phone and he dumps my bag out onto the passenger floor. And he says, you're gonna, that's what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna clean it up while I'm in the store. And he goes to leave and he takes one last look at me and he goes, do you think I meant to do that to you? Do you think that I want a brain dead, and then he says the R word, girlfriend? And then he left. And he just, that was the last thing he ever said to me. I sat there for a second because obviously I had been told I had to stay there, and if I left, I would die. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll pick the stuff up that's in my bag. And I look down and my keys are on the floor. So I was like, okay, either I go now or I wait to see what happens when he gets back. And that was definitely one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, if not the hardest, leaving, because I knew that it was all or nothing. I had to leave and go to the police station, or he would do something really terrible to me.
Bruised and covered in honey, she drove directly to a police station for help.
They had to send dogs after him. They had a helicopter looking for him. He ran through the woods, but he was arrested that day.
After the attack, Alexis sought refuge in her parents and close friends. But as so many survivors can attest to, it was a difficult journey. At first, Alexis says she had a lot of nightmares.
My parents offered to get me a new car. They offered to move. They set up crazy security cameras all over the outside of the house. They redid the fences. They bolted my windows shut because that's how he would break in, he broke my window. My mom switched jobs so that she was working days instead of nights. They did a lot for me. They did so much to make sure that I felt safe, but I don't know how I sleep. I don't really live in fear anymore. I was in very intense therapy for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. Therapy helped me 1,000%. And I definitely advocate for anyone who's been going through an abusive relationship to go to therapy, because it changes the way that your mind works. And I had to do a lot of rewiring to even interact with people. I didn't know how to talk to people anymore because I had been so sheltered from being social and having friends. And I couldn't look people in the eye. And it was just so difficult for me. Victims of domestic violence don't get the justice that they deserve, and domestic abusers don't spend a lot of time in jail or prison at all. And everyone was warning me and telling me, he's going to get out. You need to be ready.
To save Alexis the trauma of testifying and cross-examination, prosecutors decided not to go ahead with a full criminal trial and agreed to a plea.
He did take a plea deal for first-degree kidnapping for 7 years. So all of the other charges were in fact dropped.
Though the domestic abuse charges were dropped, Alexis says she is comfortable with the outcome.
He's a convicted felon. That's a felony on his record. Anytime he goes to get a job, they're going to say, oh my goodness, you went to prison for first-degree kidnapping. It's not a light charge.
Now that her abuser is behind bars, Alexis is using her experience to help others.
I knew that either I could sit with it and live with it quietly, or I could talk about it. And I wanted people to know my story. I had people from different states reaching out to me and saying, you inspired me to leave, or you inspired me to tell someone, or you inspired me to go to therapy. And I was like, okay, this makes me feel better. This is how I can heal. And so through sharing my story and through advocating for survivors and victims of domestic violence, I've healed a lot.
Alexis says telling her story in person has the most impact.
There's a huge stigma around people who experience domestic violence, and a lot of people have said things that are kind of insinuating, well, you don't look like someone who could be affected. And it just breaks my heart because it could happen to anyone. A lot of people judge victims of domestic violence because they didn't leave right away or they still haven't left. But leaving is the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship. And I really wish that more people understood before they judged people on not leaving. If I had left at any point before I did, I probably would not have been here today, or I still would have been in that abusive relationship because there was no way out for me.
Once she graduates, Alexis's chosen career path will put her on the front lines of helping other abuse survivors.
I want to go into emergency room nursing, and in that comes survivors of assault, sexual assault, domestic assault, and I just feel like because I understand, I can better help them as a patient.
Alexis has taken her life back and is determined to use it for good. She's not looking back.
A lot of people ask me if I regret dating him. And you know what? No. Because even though it was so awful to go through that, I am such a strong and resilient person, and I feel like I can truly take on anything. Like anything hard that I go through in my life, I'm like, oh my God, like this is a piece of cake. Like I've done harder things.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm TC Newman.